Think for yourself. Question authority.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Now, I said in my last video I wouldn't be doing more new Switch hardware videos unless there was another report to cover on it, and sure enough, in just over 2 weeks we have another report on new Switch hardware coming very soon from what it appears. And this is again from Bloomberg, and we also have a developer online yesterday on Twitter actually that almost directly hinted at a next-gen Switch coming very soon, possibly like it's been reported in 2021, maybe even revealed this year as far as how they're talking, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But basically, this new Nintendo Switch is being referred to in multiple publications over the past year as a next-gen Switch. Nikkei in, I believe it was April or March of 2019, referred to it as a next-generation full-model upgrade. The Wall Street Journal referred to it as a unexpected upgrade and even reported on having IGZO screens for the console, as we talked about last year and early of this year in 2020. Then we had that Taiwan, production report talking about a next generation Switch as well, 3 times in that article. That was actually not talked about by many others who covered this console rumor online just recently. They kept referring to it as a revision. So what I try to do here on this channel is simply report exactly what's on the printed page of these reports that are being presented, because if you're going to cover something, you better cover it correctly, right? As far as not interjecting something else that's not being reported by these reports. So the reports have been next generation Switch, as in the reports themselves wording it themselves, okay? So that's been what's happening since 2019 on this rumored Nintendo Switch. And what happens is a lot of information gets lost in translation from these other companies and from these other publications across the world, in Japan and Taiwan, what have you. But now we have a English report, of course, from Bloomberg, from Mochizuki, who has recovered this console, rumored over the past couple of years, starting in late 2018. It's been talked about having upgraded displays even as far back as then. Now, of course, in 2020, it's been a crazy year. We had the global pandemic that's hit every single company, every single human on Earth, and affected something with their company or their business, and personally even, right? So actually, when you think about it, it's lucky at all that PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X are even coming out in 2020 in the first place. A lot of people thought they would be delayed till 2021. So a new Switch that was reported on being planned on coming out in late 2020 to also release during the same time frame makes sense. Also, that if the pandemic did affect Nintendo, which obviously they did, because all their game releases and things like that have been reported on and rumored as being delayed and pushed back, and Mario 3D World getting pushed back and things like that, rumored of course, but obviously Nintendo has been extremely quiet in 2020, and if they were planning new hardware to be released this year, of course, knowing Nintendo, they would probably be quiet anyway because they're preparing new hardware. But perhaps in conjunction with the pandemic and all these things going on behind the scenes with Nintendo working on this new Switch that's being reported on by multiple places now, and developers even, that can lead into them being quiet about their current plans until they're ready to, basically explode and show everything they got going for this new piece of hardware that's been heavily rumored now as being even 4K ready. Now, what was said in this report, we'll go over right now. Bloomberg reported just late last night that several outside game developers, speaking anonymously as the issue is private, said that Nintendo has asked them to make their games 4K ready, suggesting a resolution upgrade is on the way, which would mean brand new hardware, because as we know, this current Switch does not display anything above 1080p, and that's its limit. And in portable mode, it goes to 720p, and that's it. So a new Switch obviously would be needed, and an upgrader would be needed to output at 4K. Now, the key thing to take away from this article is not that they said 4K just in itself, and they didn't say 4K output either as for the console. Like, they didn't report that this new console was going to have 4K output and that was it. They said that developers were told by Nintendo to have their games being ready for 4K. So basically, develop your games that have them 4K ready. If it's a mobile device, it's not going to be outputting a native 4K. However, 1080p and above, maybe 1440p, could be possible. We don't know yet. We need to see the actual hardware. We need to see the announcements. We need to see the proof, of course, before we dismiss or basically confirm anything or lean one way or another. But we need to see the proof to know exactly what they're trying to accomplish here. Is it DLSS 2.0? Is it something else? We have to wait and see. Is there some kind of technique to make the games look good in 4K that Nintendo hasn't revealed yet? Obviously, we've heard a lot about this technology with advanced AI upscaling, the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S, and Xbox Series S. AMD will have those type of technologies as well as NVIDIA. So we have to wait and see exactly what this means as far as 4K ready. But the reason why it's leaning not towards just upscaling is because if Nintendo was releasing a upgraded Switch that could just output at 4K and upscale games to 4K from the console, that wouldn't necessarily need to have developers to be involved in that situation, telling them, hey, have your games be 4K ready. That wouldn't necessarily be the case because you could upscale anything to 4K. It doesn't matter what game it is. So if you recall the original PlayStation 4 vanilla version, the one that's not the Slim, and the Xbox One S, basically developers don't have to change anything, as far as your games are concerned, for those consoles to be upscaled to 4K on the Xbox One S and the PlayStation 4 Slim, which can upscale to 4K. There's nothing there that developers need to do. They simply output their games to 1080p or 900p, and the console upscales the games to 4K on your display anyway. Makes them look just a little bit more clean, but not obviously as good as 1440p or 4K. So here we have a report from Bloomberg saying that Nintendo themselves has informed developers that they need to have their games be 4K ready. So they must be doing something there to output their games at a higher resolution than just 1080p. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to talk about that to developers and inform them, hey, get your games running at a higher resolution because our console can, in fact, support higher resolutions. That could be basically the only reason why they would say that to a developer, not just to upscale their games. Like even just a few years ago, the stores were selling DVD players that were also 4K upscale compatible. You place in your 480p DVD and it would upscale to 4K in your TV. That was it. So developers of the DVDs would not need to actually do anything different with their discs. You just pop it in and get it done. So that says something more about the rendering than just upscaling. And if the games are being output at up to 4K, maybe 1440p or what have you, then of course they're going to be needing to be prepared to look that way on a new console from Nintendo, because they can take advantage of that extra horsepower or display magic, so to speak, with advanced AI upscaling that could actually output games at 4K but not actually be rendering at 4K. There's a lot of possibilities. We simply have to wait and see because we don't know what exactly all the details are, but it does hint heavily that they are outputting games at a higher resolution than just 1080p. Otherwise, there's simply no reason to talk about it to a developer, in my opinion. Like I said, if you disagree, that's fine. However, there's something else that happened just yesterday after the Xbox Series S was revealed or leaked by Microsoft and the people involved in leaking that system. On September 8th, the developer of Monster Boy hinted extremely heavily that a next generation Switch was just around the corner. So let's take a look at what happened here on their Twitter account. The developer of Monster Boy is FDG Entertainment. Now they tweeted out a update to Monster Boy on their Twitter account for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and Xbox Series X. They said, we're happy to confirm that Monster Boy gets an update for next-gen consoles to support native 4K, 120 frames per second signal via HDMI 2.1. Please stay tuned. So they tweeted out native 4K, 120 frames per second, which is this buzzword now going on with next gen with this extremely high refresh rates and 120 frames per second. They said that with HDMI 2.1 support, and they received a reply to that message from a Switch owner of Monster Boy. And this is what they said. This is coming from Robert Lamb. He says, I have the Switch version. Looks like I gotta hunt down a PS4 copy. Like, he's giving up. He has to go and find a PlayStation 4 version so he can get the free upgrade to PlayStation 5 and get all the benefits of 4K and 120 frames per second. Now, if the developers of Monster Boy were, greedy developers and wanted more money, there would be no reason to say anything further, right? Just let the guy go buy the PlayStation 4 version and be done, and you'll get more money for your purchase from that customer who thought he had to do that because all he has is a Switch version which has no next generation console announced. So they didn't do that though. They replied to Robert Lamb. They said, who knows, with a question mark and exclamation point. Maybe Switch also has some next gen hardware in the oven. And they have another question mark there next to it with a magnifying glass face there, emoji. So they had no reason to say that. Almost like, hey, you know, just wait a little bit. Maybe you'll get something announced here from Nintendo that is quote unquote next gen, and you can upgrade through that way. Because he's saying he's going to have to go buy the PlayStation 4 version of this game, and then they're coming in when they don't have to. This developer has no reason to respond to this guy whatsoever. They can just take his money. And they're saying, hey, you know, who knows, maybe the Switch does have some next-gen hardware coming in the oven. They didn't tell them to wait and see, but, you know, that is from a developer. That could have been a sanction leaked by Nintendo. Normally, a developer would not do something like that because that can get them into big trouble. And this tweet has not been deleted, and it's been a full 24 hours. So when you combine it all together, you have this report from Bloomberg coming out late in the night on September 8th, the same day Xbox Series S was confirmed. And then you have also on the same day, basically this developer saying, hey, hold on a second. Just maybe there's a next-gen Switch coming. You know, maybe you don't have to buy that PS4 version of Monster Boy and get that upgrade to next-gen for PS5 because just maybe there's a next-gen Switch coming. That's basically what they said here. You know, this isn't a stretch, guys. You don't have to really think too hard to put two and two together here. Like I said, though, you can believe whatever you want to believe. Of course, you can believe it's all fake, whatever. But this is exactly what's going on online right now with this reported coming new Switch hardware. 4K ready. Developers have been made aware by Nintendo to make their games 4K ready, which means there's most likely a new SoC chip powering this new Switch as well. I've heard people say, oh, it's just going to be, you know, the Tegra X1 Plus revision because it can do, you know, upscaling as well. Now, while that's true, what that Tegra X1 chip Plus can't do is actually DLSS the way that it's supposed to be. It can do AI upscaling with its CUDA cores, but not with tensor cores, which is what DLSS uses to get that same effect. So yes, Nintendo would need a brand new SoC to do that for a new, more powerful Switch, next-gen Switch, that could output games at 4K and have them actually render at a lower resolution to get that benefit of looking at 4K in the first place. So that plays a part here as well. It doesn't look like this is a simple revision to the same chip because from what's being reported, it simply doesn't add up at this point, in my opinion, you know. But basically, DLSS requires tensor cores and requires something at the very least an Xavier chip Tegra, not a Tegra X1 processor or Parker chip. That wouldn't be very beneficial anyway if it's just the Tegra X1 Plus processor powering a quote-unquote next-generation Switch, because it would still be hardly any more powerful at all. And to run any type of ports going forward, it would kind of be like a waste of time for Nintendo to release that because the system wouldn't be able to run games really any differently. Maybe just a little bit better. Maybe you get 900p instead of 720p. But 4K ready, that's another ballgame completely, right? Having your games as a developer being 4K ready means that you're pumping out some higher resolution assets, you're getting your game ready to be displayed at those resolutions in case Nintendo has, you know, the powerful hardware enough to run it, or they have techniques to get that same effect on this new Switch. So a Tegra X1 Plus, I'm sorry, but I just don't see how it could, you know, do 4K gaming really, or have even DLSS type of inexperience visually, because, you know, I'll leave a link in the description. Digital Foundry and Eurogamer did a whole breakdown of what a DLSS Switch could bring and how the improvements could make on that hardware for mobile, like 540p, 720p, up to 4K, 1080p, 1440p, all different resolutions were tested. But they were very keen to point out that the Tegra X1 Plus processor does not do DLSS. So using just the AI upscaling from the CUDA cores on the Tegra X1 processor Plus, the result doesn't look very good with games. And they proved it in that article, and I'll leave a link for you in the description. So honestly, it doesn't look like it's the Tegra X1 processor Plus version, which would be just a revision Doesn't look like that, to be honest with you. If it is, I'll be surprised. Maybe it's some type of customized version, but they would still need more horsepower runs to get more to be displayed on the screen. The CPU needs to draw more, things like that. It just doesn't look likely to me. If it is, great, and if you can get games from next gen or whatever like this be upgraded like this on a Tegra X1 Plus processor, let's just be real, I'll be shocked. I'll be super happy, but I'm gonna be shocked if that's really the case, because the way technology is going, you need a lot more than just a 2015 revision, brand new chip of the 2015 chip to run any type of new games coming out in the future. Nintendo has to think about themselves as a company and think about their future. And right now, there's hardly any games getting announced to the Switch. There's hardly any AAA third-party support left on the console. There's no Doom Eternal being shown. So, are they waiting to get revealed on this new Switch? We'll have to wait and see. But the reports are supporting that, guys. And it's not really even speculation. Like, these things are happening right before your eyes. So, and it's not like it would be a surprise if Nintendo released a next-gen console around the same time as the other companies, because guess what? They've done that every single generation since their existence for making video game consoles. They've always been right there with a new console when every next generation started. And the Switch could be looked at something similar to like a Game Boy Advance, right? Nintendo had it on the market for 3 years, and then they released the DS, which was a new architecture, and still was backwards compatible with the Game Boy. But PSP also came out in 2004. Nintendo was right there with their hardware as well in 2004, and there was a balancing act there going on with Nintendo, and they had two pillars there in the handheld, and Nintendo was extremely successful with the DS. So Nintendo has all their money on the Switch right now, and the Switch doesn't have much going on for it right now in terms of games. So if you're a hardware company like Nintendo and you have everything invested in the Switch, and you have all these new consoles coming out, especially the Xbox Series S now, which is the exact same price as the Nintendo Switch at $299. And keep in mind also, the Xbox Series S has a 512 gigabyte SSD drive, which is not cheap, compared to the Switch that has 32 gigabytes of flash memory in its system. The SSD drive for the Xbox Series X is no doubt much more expensive than what Nintendo's using, and they're packing all that next-gen technology, the Xbox Series S, at up to 1440p and up to 120 frames per second at 4 teraflops of processing power. That is a crazy, crazy upgrade for next-gen at that low of a power, boost at 4 teraflops. It shows how far advanced technology and architecture has come in the past 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, since 2013 when the current generation started. So next generation is very promising, guys, for Nintendo as well. If Nintendo jumps on board with the latest technologies, they could easily get next gen ports as well at much lower teraflops than what you would expect, as what has been proven just now, today, yesterday, what have you, by Xbox Series S. 4 teraflops RDNA 2.0 by AMD can get you 1440p up to 120 frames per second with ray tracing. And remember, we talked about this last year in 2019. The architectural improvements with next generation graphics cards are through the roof. Like, the IPC advantages is crazy. You could do way more with way less than you ever have before. So the Switch, quite frankly, is completely outdated in its technology of mobile. It really could use an upgrade to get more ports and to get more life out of its system. Nintendo knows that. And it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility, of course, as the reports are saying, that they would release a new version of the Switch around the time, within a few months or what have you, from the next generation console launches. And of course, maybe they did have this planned in 2020. And now looking at this, all this information, it doesn't make sense, because if they were going to, and the pandemic messed things up, 2 or 3, 4 months delay in production and then releasing it by March 2021, that falls right in line with what the pandemic did to a lot of companies, delayed things by 3, 4, 5 months, and here we are. So very exciting stuff. We will wait and see what Nintendo does, but here we have information from Bloomberg and from a developer themselves, maybe sanctioned by Nintendo, because they want to get some leaks out there themselves, because Xbox Series S is making some waves right now with that price point at $299, a next-gen console, same price as a Switch. and it's over 10 times more powerful than the Switch at 4 teraflops, running ray tracing and next generation games. That's going to be right there for the life of next gen. Obviously, it has to be surviving at least 5 years on the market at 4 teraflops. So that is a huge upgrade in terms of the advantages that next gen brings: lower power consumption, more performance, ray tracing, all those things. And what is Nintendo going to do? We'll have to wait and see. But it's certainly exciting to see these reports just right around the time that these consoles are getting announced, and then announced for pre-order as well. Hey, you had to think something was going to happen there with Nintendo getting their product, out there as far as leaked or whatever, just in time right before, people start purchasing these next gen consoles. Got to make them think twice before making that purchase, right? That's a lot of money to spend, $300, $400, $500 on these next gen consoles. Nintendo, probably is going to make their play, and they want to get their name out there to get somebody to buy their hardware too, their new exciting hardware. Switch is pretty old now as far as technology is concerned, and at $299, even though it's portable, the games simply are just not there this holiday to really drag people in. Hyrule Warriors is a spin-off game. It's not mainline Zelda. That not necessarily is going to be pushing hardware that much. Obviously, we have the Mario collection. That's great. People are going to buy that like crazy. But as far as exciting things for the hardware is concerned, everything is on the other companies right now. So this report falls right in line and makes perfect sense of the timing of it. Right when Xbox Series S and X were confirmed, basically, and priced, and pre-orders announced and everything, here we have these reports of new Switch hardware coming. Gee, am I really surprised, right? Not at all. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Keep your eyes posted on Nintendo. They can drop a trailer any moment of new hardware. They've done it before in the past with the Switch Lite. So who knows? They could drop a trailer tomorrow morning and say, hey, here's a new Switch. It's coming very soon. They could do anything like that because they've done it in the past, and they continue to do it. So surprises are what Nintendo does. Anyways, guys, if you're not expecting it from Nintendo, they probably will do it. And that's just how it is. Alright guys, if you did enjoy this video, please hit the like button, subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.